The KDEL retention sequence prevents proteins from leaving this structure, which also contains binding immunoglobulin protein. Desmotubules link these organelles through plasmodesmata, and the COP1 protein targets vesicles moving into this organelle. One form of this organelle that releases calcium is found in muscle cells and is known as its sarcoplasmic type. One part of this organelle functions in lipid production and metabolism, while the other part is covered with ribosomes and is involved in protein synthesis. For 10 points, name this organelle that comes in rough and smooth forms and surrounds the nucleus of a cell. And the answer is endoplasmic reticulum. This molecule inhibits phosphofructokinase in the Erdem-Meyerhof-Parnas pathway. Oligomyosin can inhibit one part of the enzyme that produces this molecule. That enzyme is divided into F0 and F1 segments joined by an axal segment. In signal transduction pathways, adenylyl cyclase uses this molecule to synthesize the second messenger, cyclic AMP. The electron transport chain produces a proton gradient which is used to generate this molecule when hydrogen ions pass through its namesake synthase. For 10 points, name this molecule consisting of a purine, ribose, and 3 phosphates commonly known as the energy currency of the cell. And the answer is ATP. Patients with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome may suffer an aneurysm of part of this structure. This structure is considered overriding in patients with tetralogy of Fallot, and Turner syndrome often results in this structure's narrowing. Baroreceptors in this structure's arch relay blood pressure information to the medulla oblongata. That arch splits off into the brachiocephalic, left common carotid, and left subclavian branches. This structure's descending section passes the diaphragm and terminates by splitting into the common iliac arteries. Oxygenated blood is received from the heart and distributed by, for 10 points, what largest artery in the human body? And the answer is aorta. This polymer was first synthesized in vitro by Kobayashi and Shota. Schweizer's reagent is used to make derivatives of this compound by dissolving it. A substance made mostly of this protein is formed in the Kraft process. This polymer is built from a repeated structure of beta-1,4 glycosidic bonds, which is a reason for its high tensile strength. During cytokinesis, this polymer is secreted from the cell membrane after pectin is secreted, and the middle lamella is formed. This structure's function is fulfilled by murine or peptidoglycan in bacteria. For 10 points, name this difficult-to-digest polysaccharide made of glucose, which is primarily found in plant cell walls. And the answer is cellulose. Although this organ develops within the gut, it is derived from mesenchymal tissue rather than endodermal tissue. Periarteriolar lymphoid sheaths compose much of one portion of this organ. This organ may be absent in patients with Ivemark syndrome, and it is enlarged in patients with Bonte's syndrome. Part of this organ is composed of cords of Billroth, which are rich in monocytes, and the marginal zone separates its 2 main tissue components. It's not the kidney, but this organ's Malpighian corpuscles are known to synthesize antibodies. Most notably enlarged in patients with mononucleosis, for 10 points, name this lymphoid organ consisting of red and white pulp in which red blood cells are stored and destroyed. And the answer is spleen. A primate-exclusive process that often precedes puberty is characterized by this organ's increased secretion of DHEAS and DHEA. One layer of this organ is highly sensitive to extracellular concentrations of angiotensin II. That region, which is called the zona glomerulosa, secretes aldosterone. This organ may be afflicted with Addison's disease. The medulla of this organ secretes catecholamines, while its cortex secretes mineralocorticoids and glucocorticoids such as cortisol. For 10 points, name these two endocrine glands that sit atop the kidneys and produce epinephrine for the flight or fight response. And the answer is adrenal glands. A variant of this process uses the KDPG and fructose biphosphate types of an enzyme that is typically used. In this process, the action of enolase releases water, and triose phosphate isomerase interconverts dihydroxyacetone phosphate with glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Regulatory enzymes of this pathway include glucokinase, hexokinase, and phosphofructokinase. A dehydrogenase enzyme converts the product of this pathway to acetyl-CoA. 2 net ATP molecules are released in the payoff phase of this pathway. For 10 points, name this process which produces pyruvic acid from breaking down glucose. And the answer is glycolysis. Decreased beta defensin activity in this disease leads to frequent Burkholderia and Pseudomonas infections. Commonly, patients with this disease have a deletion of 3 nucleotides that code for phenylalanine in the 508 position on chromosome 7. This disease may lead to clogging of the pancreatic ducts because the protein CFTR gets stuck in the endomembrane system. This disease, which may be diagnosed with a sweat test, is characterized by the inability to transport chloride ions. For 10 points, name this genetic disease in which mucus builds up in the airways. And the answer is cystic fibrosis. One section of this structure releases border cells and includes the mucilage sheath. Pneumatophores are negatively gravitropic examples of these structures. A high ratio of auxin to cytokinin tends to promote development of these structures. Apoplastic transport into the stela of these structures is prevented by their Casparian strips. These structures may form mutualistic relationships with fungi called mycorrhizae. Carrots and turnips are edible examples of these structures. For 10 points, name these plant organs that anchor the plant to the ground and absorb nutrients from the soil. And the answer is roots. A protein pump that removes this element from the cytosol is regulated by phospholambin. This element is released from lateral sacs by ryanodine receptors. Influx of this element into presynaptic terminals causes vesicle release. Binding of this element causes a shift in the troponin-tropomyosin complex. This element is stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. In muscle cells, a rise in the concentration of this element triggers contraction. This element's uptake is facilitated by vitamin D, and it is required for proper mineralization of bones. For 10 points, name this element with atomic number 20, symbolized Ca. And the answer is calcium.